Welcome to Proudly Serving, where we talk with government leaders about how they're best serving the people in their communities. Meet Seth Norket, proudly serving the city of Belmont, North Carolina.
Belmont's a small city in Gaston County, and we've got a population of somewhere around 13,000. It is in North Carolina. Many people would probably say Belmont's a really good location to have access to outdoor activities, while also giving a really short commute to work. And we've continued to see the approval and completion of a lot of residential developments in our area here recently, along with some industrial. So our downtown area especially is experiencing some redevelopment and revitalization, which is really nice. And that includes a historical mill in Belmont that was recently approved for a project that is going to retain the history of that building while also bringing some new life to our downtown and Main Street area. So we really believe that this modern era of development in a way should bring, Belmont an establishment of a new identity while also retaining the small town charm and sense of community that so many people love.
Yeah, that's great. So, your role is leading IT for the city, and I know that there's been a lot of changes that you've made. Do you want to talk about what you inherited and how you're kind of transitioning the city services, to modernize them?
I'll start off first by mentioning that I've only been in this current role for about a year now. And prior to me accepting this position, all of our IT related services, contracts, and needs were managed by several different people here at the city. And those people were doing a really good job of juggling these responsibilities while also performing, their own full-time positions as well.
Right.
So the addition of my position has allowed us to put a full focus on our IT related services and projects. And so far we've seen the implementation of a new public works software that has improved our cost reporting and empowered our employees with the tools that they need to work more efficiently within our public works department. And we've also implemented a cloud accessible security system for several of our city buildings. And we've got some plans to add more later this fiscal year. And I've worked with our police department to create some online submission forms for reporting crimes, submitting complaints about an officer, which is very rare. So we're kind of proud of that as well. A lot of times that sort of thing is not readily available in an easy to submit form online. So we're trying to make ourselves as transparent and accessible as possible with our police department. But we can also accept commendations for officers online. If somebody wants to, report a commendation for a really good experience they've had, they can do that as well. And additionally, we transitioned to a new managed service provider that was quite recently. And that provided us with new computer hardware. It reduced our downtime and also freed up some of our IT budget to put funds towards additional projects. Mm-hmm. And of course, our most recent upgrade, I would say, would be the website, which, we just recently finished that less than 30 days ago, and we've been really happy with that so far.
So how are you assessing value? I think there's a struggle with cities, especially, and resources that are available. I can do it in-house or I can hire somebody else to do it. How are you assessing the value of having somebody else help support you on those things while you're still managing kind of the top level functions of those services?
So, and I've kind of played around with this a little bit myself, just as a request from some of my supervisors. We looked at, the cost that would potentially be involved to have a full IT staff on board. And really for all of our needs, we would quite surpass what we're currently paying for our managed service provider at this time. It just makes more sense from our standpoint that we found to maybe have just one high level person on staff to communicate and kind of help guide these transitions and hold, these companies accountable and make sure that we're getting the services that we're paying for. But that also frees up those additional funds that we would potentially pay to have a full support staff. support staff, today, especially ones that are here within the United States, are quite expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I actually used to work in 24/7 support previously, and on average, our salaries were generally somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 per year on average.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're talking support staff of 5 at that kind of rate, and then you add in the additional costs of, healthcare and benefits, that quickly surpasses what we're paying for a managed service provider who can give us, a full team of agents that are available within our work period for us to submit tickets to. So that's kind of how we gauge that. I just kind of sit down and look at those averages and just put a full game plan together to see what makes the most sense. And for us, this just seems like the best option. That was kind of why we went with that route.
Yeah, it seems like there's factors that are involved. I mean, especially with the web stuff. I'd love to understand what your thinking was behind moving from software as a service for Belmont's website. It's definitely something that people can host themselves and manage. And I think, what Proud City offers, I'm biased, but is much different and much more. But what is and there's a lot of factors that go into determining value, support obviously being one of them. But what do you see as all of the value for going software as a service as opposed to self-hosting? Or love to hear your thoughts on kind of the traditional models or traditional government website service providers. What's the difference between the value add with going with software as a service for your website as opposed to either doing it in-house or, a traditional government website provider?
And, I'll touch on this a little bit as well, just because I've come to find a lot of times within the public sector, just because the IT staff they have is very overworked, and a lot of them have been doing it for a long time. I've come to find a lot of times, most of them are not very familiar with what software as a service is, or if they are, they're not aware of it. A lot of them, I'm thinking, probably are using a service that's similar to that at this point. But, I'll give a quick explanation kind of just of why we chose that and what software as a service is and how I explain that. It's primarily that kind of delivery model where it doesn't require any type of contract in most cases. Instead, you sign up for that software for a monthly or an annual access fee, and you have the ability to cancel at any time. Mm-hmm. Much like Netflix, how it operates, for example. You just agree to that term length, you pay your monthly fee, and you get access to what they're offering. So that's a good example of kind of something that's similar to software as a service. And, really, as far as the cost factor goes, why we didn't choose to do it on, in-house or on site, that alone would have caused us additional costs for, web server hosting. We would have needed additional hardware. We would have required additional staff to help with that set up and to continue to monitor that. And then also, just additional upgrade costs as time goes by. You may end up with a situation where you need additional storage for that site, and that would require another project plan to try to implement that. Mm-hmm. But we've also found with government especially, it's just easier to try to move things off site or into the cloud, because in a way, that kind of alleviates some of that responsibility on our side as far as security and safety of our data. That eliminates the need for security staff in some ways, because that's being managed by another company who has their own security staff that ensure that your information that's stored on their servers is safe. But just moving into some of that as well. One thing I found when I was interviewing a lot of the providers when I first started on this process was you end up with a situation where all the big players in this sector require multi-year contracts. And with that type of model, the main focus of the representative that you're dealing with is just to get your signature on that agreement.
Sales,
and, for them, exactly. And that ensures that they've secured your funds for the duration of that specified term length. And, it includes a costly penalty if you attempt to cancel it early.
Right.
And speaking from personal experience with our previous provider, we accepted that agreement once our website was launched. It kind of seemed like we were no longer a priority.
Hmm.
When we experienced account related problems or trouble accessing certain things on the website, or if we needed, support to learn how to do something, sometimes it would take days or weeks to get a response.
Right.
And with software as a service, the driving factors of those companies that are providing that model is very different. And with my past experience in that, I've seen that software as a service providers historically place great emphasis on both their customer service and how often they provide platform updates to include new features.
Right.
And this attention to newly available features and the customer experience was my primary driving factor, when I was looking at that as a possibility for our web service.
Yeah.
And we also experienced significant cost reduction to our IT budget by going with the software as a service platform in relation to our website services within that budget, which, that was another welcome benefit. And in my opinion, I think software as a service is the future of web development platforms that we see today, especially in the public sector where budgets are very tight and departments want to get the best services and experience possible for the lowest cost. So I really think this is going to take off, and we'll see a lot more governments and public sector organizations switching to this sort of model in the future.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely telling like who you interface with more often prior to signing contract or, in our case, subscription. Are you talking with people that are close to the product, or are you talking with people that have sales in their title? And when you talk about software as a service, a lot of times you're not going to be talking with anybody much because everything is pretty transparent and seamless on the procurement side, or you're going to be talking with somebody who actually uses the product on a regular basis and has input on how it's built and is listening to you and incorporating that feedback into the product. So it's just, it's interesting how it's evolved, and it'll be interesting to see how government continues to assess the value of web services for cities, whether it's, the things you've touched on around support, security, hosting, and product development. In a lot of those, I think that cities are really starting to wake up to holistic thinking around value and what software as a service can do to help them, scale the services that they have to their communities. If you were talking with a peer and they were thinking, I mean, you kind of touched on this, what would you say to a peer who was asking you, what should I do when it comes to, kind of web services in my city?
For me, and I would just compare it to my exact experience, and that was, I went after the biggest players in the game and sat down and I went through their demos. I heard what they had to say. I went through the full process, got quotes from them that included every single feature in detail to see what we were going to get and at what cost. And for me, when I was going through and looking at those contracts, it just became very obvious to me in a situation where we did want to cut some of that budget, but we also wanted to have the freedom and the ability to make changes at any time we wanted on our web page. And we didn't want to be locked into a contract. So for me, it just became obvious just looking at it in that sense. When you get them all lined up beside each other, you look at what you're going to get, you look at the pros and cons of each. The cost factor alone makes the software as a service model well worth it, in my opinion. And with software as a service too, and this is something else that I'll touch on, is a lot of times those developers are in direct contact with the customers. If there's a new feature that you want to add, put that in. And software as a service models, sometimes they release features, every 30 days, every 60 days, every 90 days. It varies on the features that they have coming down the pipe, but you don't get that with a traditional provider. If there's a new feature that comes out, you have to wait until your term length is up and sign a new contract, get access to those, or you have to pay an additional access fee in most cases. So that would be my recommendation. Just go out there, get as many quotes and term lengths as you can, just compare them all. And I think for yourself, especially when you look at them side by side, it'll become very obvious as to what the best decision would be.
Yeah, that's great. I think that, something that we've talked about and you shared with me before is the incentive on the the service provider, the vendor's side. If you if you're not, once you sign the contract and you've got a 3-year deal, if you're locked into it, there isn't really an incentive for that provider to provide a better service until 3 years from now when they're trying to sell you again. So if you have a subscription, and you've said this to me before, if you have a subscription, or you're not relying, the service provider, the vendor is not relying on a contract year over year, overall there's going to be a better experience and product, which I don't think people really take into account, the impact of a longer term contract and what that means on the service that you're going to get over time.
I agree, and that was a little bit of kind of what I touched on as well, with why we kind of moved to software as a service. That's a huge factor. I don't think that should be overlooked, and it's one of those things where, do you want to have a company that is providing you with a service that is safe and secure because they know they have that contract, and if you try to get out of it, there's going to be penalties. So either way, they're going to get your money through that contract term, or they're going to get penalty fees. Or do you want a provider that's going to be working for you each and every day with that motivation to provide you with the best service, the best customer experience, and the best features, because they know that you have that freedom to leave. You're not locked in. So they're certainly more driven on a software as a service platform. So that's why I was very pleased to find Proud City with the option as software as a service. That was huge for me, and just immediately sparked my interest. And that was kind of what started our conversations off.
Yeah, well, we look forward to, as we say, joining you and proudly serving, the community that you serve on a day-to-day basis.
So yeah, we're looking forward to the partnership as well. I think this is going to be great, and we've got some really cool ideas that we're going to be trying out in the coming months with different seasonal activities we're potentially going to have. We'll kind of play around with the color schemes of the site, the images, and kind of really play to the different seasons within Belmont, and showcase that on the website. That was something else that we thought was really cool, to have the ability to do that, because we can make those changes at any time that we want.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't have to pay anybody more to do it.
Exactly.
That was Seth Norket, proudly serving the city of Belmont, North Carolina. Thank you for listening to this episode of Proudly Serving. Visit us online at proudcity.com/proudlyserving.